So, Ms. Starr, how would you say your healing path from the, I mean, your grief is your work now. So, but what helped you, sustained you when it was most difficult?
Before I answer that, I just have to disclose that Sister Greta is one of my closest friends, and it means so much to me to have you here with us. And I know she's deeply connected to Jim as well. And so this is a little love party over here. And I got to go into the prison with Greta a few days ago and do this writing practice that I did with you all today, as I mentioned, with Greta at the men's colony, and fall in love with the men there. I hope you don't mind, honey. I did. I fell in love with every one of them, just as Greta does and is. It was a peak experience, I would say, of my life. And we're already trying to hatch a plan to do it again. So I love you, Greta, and I trust you, and I know that you're deeply suffering right now for the world, and I know you're bringing that with great dignity and grace into this conversation. But I happen to know how broken your heart is for the pain of the world and the pain that is to come for the most vulnerable in society and for our mother, the earth. So this question, how have I sustained myself through personal losses?
Like healing, or maybe it even has to do with the wounding you walked through as a young person before you had started having, you had loss right away when you were young.
Yeah.
So how did that wounding turn into, like, what modalities were most helpful to you?
Great. So one of the things that is maybe a little bit different with the way I approach the wounds is that I don't really think in terms of healing. I know that sounds counterintuitive because you want a wound to heal. But what I'm really more interested in with the kind of soul wounds that some of us, maybe every single one of us, endure, is being present to them. I think society in general, particularly contemporary Western society, is really grief phobic, and we don't know how to tend ourselves and each other when we experience great losses. But one of the things we do is we try to get away from it. We're conditioned to get away from it. So to self-medicate or be medicated by, to medicalize our grief, or to overconsume substances or stuff, buy more stuff, that's supported, that's encouraged. But and using spiritual practices, what you referenced earlier is spiritual bypassing. That's a popular method for not dealing with your grief. I'm going to either medicate or meditate my way out of being present to this sacred experience of the broken heart. And I think that you're right. I've had a lot of death, a lot of loss in my life. My brother died of cancer when he was 10 and I was 8. And then my first boyfriend died when I was 14. And then many, many losses. But the big one, many of you know, was the death of my 14-year-old daughter in a car accident when I was 40. And that was the one that invited me to put my money where my mouth was and not run away. And Jenny's death coincided to the day, some of you know this story, with the publication of my first book, which happened to be a translation of Dark Night of the Soul by John of the Cross. So I'd been immersed in these teachings that I shared with you today of those moments in our lives where we're stripped of, you could call it an existential crisis, but where we're stripped of a sense of connectedness and meaning, of the felt presence of the divine. You know, that warmth of being held in the dark. And on top of that, all of our ideas about the divine make no sense. They just seem stupid and irrelevant. And so, having been immersed in the teachings of the Dark Knight, well, for many years at that point, but especially for a year as I translated it, gave me just enough of a tiny toehold on the slippery rock face of my loss to go, okay, this is not going to make any sense. All meaning has been stripped. And so it's not like if I stay with this, I'll have a dark night of the soul experience and be transformed. It wasn't intellectual, but there was a bravery in me, a little tiny bit, to enter it, to not turn away, and to enter it and be present with the unbearable anguish. That was my mantra. It's just unbearable anguish. There was a willingness to be with it, not because I wanted to prove how spiritually strong I was, but as an act of love. As an act of love. So the Dark Night of the Soul teachings, even though it was a book, it was so much more than a set of words. It was an invitation to lovingly abide in radical unknowing. And that's an uncomfortable space, but it's also a sacred space. And I detected the fragrance of the sacred wafting up from the embers of my suffering. And I knew to pay attention to that and to trust it.
Thank you. I'll just want to add, when I was in the process of being ordained as an Episcopal priest, I was given a battery of psychological exams, which my sister priests over here have gone through, and they came back to me and said, "You have unprocessed trauma." I had been sexually assaulted by a family best friend of a family member, and I thought I had dealt with it, because this wasn't so many years ago, and I was shocked. I was like, "No, I think I'm good." And the diocese said, one of the women that was in charge there, she said, "I want you to get help, and I want you to get EMDR therapy," which is what I don't remember. Eye movement, and for me, it's been like, I don't know, it's mysteriously magical healing. So I just putting it out there, because now, even at Homeboy Industries, Father Greg Boyle, all the therapists are using EMDR with the homies now, who all have, trauma, PTSD. So it's been really wonderful modality for me. Just wanted to put that out there. Yeah. And do you find, just this recently at the prison, the invitation that I asked the men to do was to write a letter to a compassion letter to their younger self. And I always engage in the same practice that the men do. So I wrote a compassion letter to young Greta, and I realized that I found myself writing in the way Mirabai has told me to, that I was writing saying, "No, I see poor Greta, that no one listened to you. No one asked you anything. No one wanted to know. You really didn't know who you were. It was almost like you were invisible." And then I realized that my healing journey has turned into me being the one listening to the other with love, to create the curiosity, the sacred space for stories to be told, for truth to be spoken. So don't you think that sometimes your wound is your regenerative gift?
Of course.
Mirabai?
Yeah,
Or-
Mirabai.
No, you have.
No.
Oh, yes, I do. No, it takes one to know one. And I often feel it's like we're two wounded people sitting in a room together, and you're hoping that some of your time with me will help you be more whole. And I hope so too, this way. So I think my own trauma gives me empathy with their traumatized survival strategies. It's helped me a lot, actually. Yeah.